Kublai Khan is a name synonymous with ruthlessness, the grandson of Genghis Khan and founder of the Mongol Empire, second biggest contiguous land realm after that of his grandfather. By the time the 13th century rolled around, he had already subjugated all of China and established the Yuan dynasty there. But he wasn't done, not by a long shot. South of China lay the kingdom of Viet, better known today as Vietnam, whose rulers were known as the Tern dynasty, and they were a stumbling block to Kublai's further expansionist ambitions, so he decided to invade them. Our first story is from 1258. Kublai Khan assembled a massive army and sent it through China's Yunnan province into Vietnam, quickly overwhelming the local garrisons. This army was led by his brother, General Oriangkade, who was quite fond of torturing his captives. He soon reached and captured the Vietnamese capital, Thang Long, or Hanoi today, but found that the Tern rulers weren't willing to bend the knee or even surrender. The whole city had adopted a scorched earth strategy and pulled down its gates. General Oriangkade entered the city, but found it deserted, empty. The Vietnamese had withdrawn tactically, taking their supplies and livestock with them, and soon cut off all trade to the city. With food and supplies running low, the Mongols were soon hit by disease and pestilence. Unable to hold out any longer, they were forced to withdraw after just a few days. However, Kublai was not a man to be denied, and about 30 years later, in 1284, he would try again. Our next story is from 1284 to 1285. Kublai Khan assembled another massive army and once again sent his son Togan across China into Vietnam. Now, this invasion force crossed into Vietnam through two routes. One army went by land, while the other, under the command of Togan himself, sailed up the coast. The Vietnamese commander, the brilliant Tern Chang Tao, noticed this and ordered the main army to lure the Mongol land force deep into the country, then cut off their retreat by sea. He then positioned his navy to block Togan's naval force from sailing north. Thus, both armies were cut off from their supplies. The Mongols, finding themselves trapped, tried to flee, but the Vietnamese were ready for them. A series of lightning battles ensued, all of which went in the Vietnamese favor. The Mongols were routed at every turn. The final and perhaps most decisive battle was fought at Changzhou. Here, a large portion of the Mongol forces were wiped out, including many high-ranking officers. Seeing the writing on the wall, Toga retreated south, only to fall ill and die on the way. The rest of the Mongol army either dead, captured, or starving, and thus, the second Mongol invasion of Vietnam was a crushing defeat. And what a defeat it was! It was one of the biggest ever inflicted on the Mongols, and certainly the most humiliating. And that's saying something. The Vietnamese victory was all the more impressive because of the disparity in numbers between the two armies. The Mongols outnumbered them at least 3-1. Kublai Khan was stunned. He couldn't believe that his super-powerful Mongol army could be defeated, let alone humiliated, by a tiny little kingdom like Vietnam. He sent a letter to the Vietnamese emperor asking him to submit and become a vassal of the great Mongol Empire. Tr Tang, the Vietnamese emperor, didn't even bother replying to this letter. Kublai was furious, but knew that another invasion would only result in more humiliation for the Mongols. And so, the Vietnamese were left alone in peace. What do you think? How did the Vietnamese win against the mighty Mongols? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. The year is 1287 and the Mongol Empire is at its peak. Under the rule of Kublai Khan, his armies have stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. So now he sets his eyes on the prize, the riches of the Chinese South. There's just one problem though. Between him and those riches is a small but fierce country called Vietnam. And in recent years, they've given the Mongols quite a bit of trouble. So before starting his campaign, Kublai decides to bring in the big guns. Literally. This will be the largest Mongol invasion force ever assembled, led by his brother, the infamous Mongol prince, Omar Khan. The army will enter by land and sea. Omar will lead the troops on the ground, while another Mongol prince, Ali, gets the naval forces ready. They're gonna need a big fleet to get past the Vietnamese defenses. But Kublai assures him that it'll be worth it because at the end of this campaign, Ali and his descendants will rule the southern seas as Khans of a new Mongol kingdom. So with a promise of great wealth and power, the Mongol princes set out to conquer the Vietnamese. But Cheong Dao is ready. He knows the Mongols are coming. He's been expecting them for years, in fact. So he's had time to prepare. He sends messengers up and down the country, calling for able-bodied men to come to the capital and do their civic duty. Men of all ages come running, along with women and children. When they arrive, he organizes them into a massive work crew and sets them to work building ships. Day and night, they hammer away at wooden planks, fashioning hundreds of ships of all sizes. Some are swift and nimble, perfect for reconnaissance or escaping through the rivers. Others are large and sturdy, ideal for transporting troops across the sea. When they're done, he outfits them with catapults and ballistae, along with plenty of arrows and spears. Then he divides his forces into 3 groups. One will stay behind in port to guard the capital. Another will sail north to stop any Mongol reinforcements from coming south. And the third, the largest fleet, will head out to meet the Mongol navy head-on. Meanwhile, Ali has arrived with the Mongol fleet off the coast of Vung Tau. He anchors the fleet a few miles offshore and begins ferrying troops to the land in small boats. Little do they know, they're being watched day and night by the Vietnamese scouts. And when the fleet leaves, turn quickly, sends word back to the capital. Within days, the Mongol soldiers are marching north towards Hanoi, when suddenly, whoopee, fire in the hole. The Vietnamese ambushing party arrives just in time for dinner and promptly annihilates the unprepared Mongols. With the northern Mongols taken care of, the Vietnamese turn their attention to the naval invaders. They sail out to meet the Mongols in the middle of the Bach Dang River. Here, the Vietnamese divide their fleet into 2 groups, each hiding in the tall grass near the riverbank. When the Mongols approach, they send out a few ships to lure the enemy into a trap. As soon as the unsuspecting Mongol fleet enters the river, the Vietnamese unleash their full force. Arrows fly like rain. Catapults begin hurling, large stones and spears are thrust into the sides of the ships. The Mongols are utterly caught off guard. Their ships are too big to navigate the narrow river. They're being attacked from all sides and they're taking on water fast. Within minutes, most of the fleet is sunk and the rest are on fire. Ali watches in horror as his ships burn to the waterline. He desperately tries to rally the remaining ships to break through the Vietnamese lines and escape, but it's no use. The Mongols are defeated. He survives the battle, but he's captured along with thousands of other Mongols. The Vietnamese parade them through the streets of Hanoi before throwing them in jail. They either die of starvation or disease or are put to work in salt mines, where they slowly lose their minds. Only a handful ever make it out alive. Turin celebrates his victory by erecting a large monument in the middle of the river on the spot where the Mongols were defeated. For centuries, Vietnamese poets have sung of his praises, and for good reason. Not only did he defeat one of the largest navies in history, he also invented the ambush. Back in Mongolia, Kublai is not so pleased with the news. He throws a tantrum, smashing priceless artifacts and killing courtiers who try to calm him down. It doesn't matter how many times he hears it. It'll never not be embarrassing when your brother loses to a tiny, insignificant country. So he vows revenge, but he'll have to wait. Kublai has bigger problems to deal with. Internal rebellions are brewing across his empire, and soon they'll erupt into civil war. Kublai will spend his last years trying to put down these rebellions. Fighting alongside his grandson, the future founder of the Yuan dynasty. Though he never got his revenge against the Vietnamese, Kublai still had a good run. He successfully conquered most of China and established one of the largest empires in history. Not bad for a guy who took the long way around. To get there, watch The Long Road to Power, The Story of Kublai Khan, or check out the series in the description below.